So welcome back to the episode of the BioHub. Today, we're delighted to welcome Abid Ansari, CFO of General Oncology, who are at the forefront of tackling some of the most urgent challenges in oncology. As CFO, Abid plays a critical role in driving the company's business development and financial strategy and supporting its bold vision for growth. And Abid's career spans more than 2 decades in life sciences, during which he's raised over 450 million to fuel innovation. Prior to General Oncology, Abid held 3 CFO roles in biotech, as well as prior roles at GSK and Medimune. So join us today as we'll talk through the science at General Oncology, the fundraising environment currently, and Abid's journey. So Abid, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for having me. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, you too. And look, I know we've known each other for a few years, but could you take us through your journey from the beginning, what first drew you to the life sciences space, and what inspired your transition from finance to company building?
Yeah, sure. So I originally started my career as an engineer, and I really was pushed hard into engineering by my father. I was a chemical engineer. And so growing up, in high school and even in college through the engineering curriculum at Purdue, you don't take any, finance or accounting related classes. So I was working for ExxonMobil in their cooperative education program, and they had me do a discounted cash flow analysis on this $15,000, mass spectrometer. And it was my first exposure to finance. And I loved it. My brain just kind of spiraled out of control. I started thinking about all the different things you could do with a discounted cash flow analysis, and that led me down the path of going to business school and then also getting a CPA along the way. I interned. So while I was in business school, I interned with a company in Indiana called Dow AgroSciences, and that was my first foray into biotech, thinking about biology and crop protection and improving yields. And it was, compared to, manufacturing and producing gas and kerosene and meat and those sorts of things, it was much more complicated, much more regulated. And thinking through how biotech relates to developing medicines, improves healthcare. It was all just really, really fascinating to me. So I spent a little bit of time in a specialty chemicals company coming out of business school, but then I started at Medimune, and I just loved it. Spent several years in a variety of finance and BD roles within Medimune and GSK. And I always wanted to do lots of different things within finance and BD while I was at Medimune and GSK, and learned as much as I could, through those experiences. But in the back of my head, I always wanted to work for a smaller company and have much more of an impact, developing medicines at a small biotech. So what was really interesting was at Precision BioSciences, they were developing a program for severe hemophilia A at the time. And the program was just so fascinating to me because it was targeting what's called an intron 22 inversion, where a portion of your DNA is actually reverted. It's located in the wrong position. And that's the exact same inversion and mutation that my 2 boys have. So that's really what led me into the small biotech space, is being able to have a really significant influence and make a difference in a much smaller setting, and being attracted to this really cool and interesting science that could have a profound effect on my family.
Yeah, I love that. And looking back, were there any pivotal moments or mentors in particular that shaped your path into biotech leadership?
Yeah, I think from a mentorship perspective, listen, I mean, when you make the jump from big pharma to small biotech, there are lots of things that you need to learn. I would say a big mentor for me was Stephen Webster. So he was the CFO of Spark Therapeutics. He's on a number of boards. And when I was making that transition, I had never talked to a bank before, right? I'd never dealt with crossed over investors or mutual funds. And Steven was great because he was willing to pick up the phone and answer my text messages, and no question was too dumb. And so I always appreciated him and the help and guidance that he provided me throughout my journey. And then also early on in my career, at MedImmune, Jim Kelly was the ideal kind of first biotech boss that any finance professional would want to have. I mean, he was tough, he was demanding, but he was the one that encouraged me to get my CPA, and he's always provided me really good career advice and always stretched me while I was at MedImmune. And I did 3 or 4 different roles, a number of them with him while I was at MedImmune, and he was really great at challenging you and stretching your capabilities, and yeah, he was fantastic. In terms of, you mentioned pivotal moments, the one thing I think that's been just really pivotal for me that I think about is all the people that I've been able to hire and work with in my career. I've really enjoyed seeing them get stretched and challenged and work on different things and progress and get promoted and go on to do lots of interesting and cool things in their careers. Bonnie Rorak came to Precision BioSciences as as an associate director of FP&A, and now she's a senior director and she's getting a CPA. May Burris came on board as an SEC reporting manager, and she's a vice president, a corporate controller now. Sinu Bundaru came on board as a director of IT, and he's the vice president of operations now. So I've really appreciated, the mentoring and the professional development and the coaching and teaching that I've been able to do the past, 9-10 years of my career.
So, Abid, what do you see as General Oncology's key differentiators in such a crowded oncology landscape?
So I think for us, there's really 4 key differentiated features. The first one is we're using these 4 constituents, so BCNU, melphalan, ascorbic acid, and hydroxycobalamin, in a way that creates a mechanism of action that is completely unique and proprietary to General Oncology. There are some similarities with DDR, DNA damage response, but really the mechanism is unique, is proprietary to us, and no one else is doing something like this. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is our approach is designed for long-term survival. So a patient receives 2 cycles of GO4, and they are done with treatment. And we will be presenting data from the phase 1 study at ESMO in a couple of weeks, and we look forward to sharing those results with everyone. The third thing is our approach. So GO4, the approach is expansive. And in the current phase 1 study, we targeted BRCA patients so far, but the mechanism is expansive and will be opening up enrollment to non-BRCA patients in the phase 1 dose expansion study. And we're excited to see what those results will be, 6 to 12 months from now. So that's kind of the third big thing. And then the fourth thing, probably most important, is our approach is safe. 0 long-term side effects so far. And again, this is supported by the mechanism and the hypotheses that result from the underlying mechanism that we've tested in the phase 1 study. So again, it's a proprietary mechanism of action. Our approach is designed for long-term survival. Our approach is expansive. We're going to be expanding into non-BRCA patients, and our approach is safe. Those are really 4 key differentiators in comparison to others in the field.
Nice. Very good. onto the fundraising aspect. So I guess it's particularly challenging right now with how the market is. What's been your philosophy on raising capital, and what have you found to be the most important factors in building investor confidence?
Yeah, sure. I think fundraising, it is a very challenging environment. It's been challenging for the last couple of years. There's all these statistics out there. The last, 20 IPOs, all but one or two are trading under issuance. Valuations have been coming down the past couple of years. I think in terms of fundraising, there's a couple of things that small companies need to keep in mind. I think the first thing is you want to make sure that you're keeping your options open. Um, Especially given just what's happening in the overall marketplace, making sure you are not only relying on new investors, but you are also relying on your existing shareholders to keep things moving. I also think you need to explore interesting partnerships and licensing arrangements. Obviously talking to the traditional institutional VCs, making sure you're getting feedback from them and incorporating that feedback into your story, I think is really important. But also targeting other types of investors, family offices, high net worth individuals. I mean, General Oncology, we've raised 16.6 million to date, all through high net worth individuals. So I think keeping your financing options open. Thinking about royalty financing, that could be a potential path. Even debt financing, looking at grants. I've come across companies where they've gotten very significant state-funded grants, and that's allowed them to attract capital from other institutional VCs. So I think, especially in this environment, keeping all these different options, partnering, licensing, different types of investors that you can talk to and meet. I think keeping all those options open and seeing which ones come to fruition is really, really important. And the other thing is, because keeping all of these options is so important, maybe you're attending conferences that you wouldn't have attended before. Maybe there's local conferences that attract local high net worth individuals or angel investors that could be worth attending. Maybe there's some of the lesser known BD conferences that are worth attending that could attract some, more of your mid cap companies that could be open to partnership. So I think that's all of that is really important. In terms of investor confidence, I've had the pleasure of dealing with a variety of boards, a lot of different types of investors. When I think of gaining their confidence, I think the number one thing is you need to be very transparent, and you need to make sure that you're aligned with your board and your shareholders on your goals and really how you're prioritizing all the different projects and your portfolio in general. I think it's really important to make sure that there's constant communication that you're having with not only your board but with your existing shareholders, and keeping them in tune with how you're tracking against your goals and how you're thinking about different projects within the portfolio. So I think that's kind of step number one. And then the second thing, which seems obvious, but sometimes isn't to small companies that you're working with, it's execution. If you commit to delivering something, it's delivering on what you said you were going to deliver. It's those IND goals. It's getting those phase 1 studies started in a timely fashion. It's your manufacturing goals, making sure all of those you're in alignment with your board and your shareholders, and executing against those goals. I think is super important. And then the last thing, which I think is especially in this environment, and I know this is easier said than done, but having that strategic partnership in place with a large pharmaceutical company or a mid-cap company that can not only provide you with capital to help you progress your portfolio, but you know, it's really helping you provide that intellectual capital, right? It's that big brother partnership that can help you with clinical development strategy, thinking of different ways to execute your research portfolio and perform different experiments. Having that in place can instill a lot of confidence into your investor and shareholder base.
Very good. And do you think there's any particular tricks of the trade that you've learned over the years that you think other biotech leaders could benefit from?
Yeah, for sure. And listen, you learn through failure. I think that's something I obviously in my career I haven't done everything important, everything right, and I think there's a number of things that I know I've learned in my career that can benefit folks. I think when you're thinking about sort of the fundraising environment, the biggest thing everybody will tell you is being able to attract a lead investor or somebody that's going to do diligence on behalf of all the other shareholders that are participating in a particular round. And I think it's really important for companies, and I know this can be maybe tough to think about, especially in this environment, but you want to make sure you're doing your own diligence on a potential lead investor. And I know I found it really valuable to talk to other portfolio companies that a particular lead investor has led, and it really helps you know what you're getting into. What are the some of the challenges that you're going to face, and what are maybe some pitfalls to watch out for and look for as you're going through and progressing through the relationship. So it's not only the lead investor doing diligence on you and the company, but you should be doing the same thing on a lead investor and the partner. If you're thinking about a partnership with a GSK or a Pfizer or a Merck, you should talk to other companies that those companies have partnered with, so you get a feel of what the relationship is going to be like as you go through that partnership journey. So I think that doing diligence, I think that's one of the key things I know I've learned. The other big thing, and I've learned and seen this the hard way, especially when it comes to raising capital, it's making sure you're partnering your BD transactions in a way that allows you to raise capital in the future. And what that means is if you are licensing out your lead asset, and you're going to get an upfront payment and there's royalties on the back end, there's a really good chance if it's structured as a traditional license, you're not going to be able to raise equity capital going forward on that particular program. So it's really important to talk to lots of different people, think about how you're structuring your BD transactions, and make sure you structure them in a way that still leaves value on the back end and allows you to raise capital as those programs continue to progress in your pipeline. So I think that's number two. That's another big thing. The third big thing is fundraising never stops. So I've seen this where a company goes through a Series A or a Series B, and it's hooray, we made it, we've done it, we've got our 50 million, 100 million in the bank, and now we can just focus on what's going on inside the company, and we don't have to deal with new investors anymore. And that can't be further from the truth. I mean, I've seen situations where a company goes through a fundraising exercise, and then not more than a year later, something happens with the fund, and projects are delayed, and you have to go into a different direction, and you need new investors involved, and you haven't been talking to new investors. And in the fundraising rounds I've been in, very rarely is there a situation where you meet an investor for the first time and he or she isn't ready to invest in your company within a couple of weeks. It's all about relationships that have developed and have been fostered over 5, 6, 12 months. So even after fundraising, it's setting goals for yourself. Hey, I'm gonna meet 5 or 10 new investors this quarter and just update them on what's going on with my company, how we're thinking about fundraising, because you never know when the right time could be to do another round or supplement a current round that you're going through. So never stop fundraising is another big lesson I've learned. The fourth thing is, as you're preparing your pitch and you're thinking about talking to investors, I've learned it's really important to test your pitch with maybe your non-lead type of investors first. And that way you can get maybe some of the kinks out of your presentation. And you always learn something new as you're giving your pitch and you're talking to investors. And so it's maybe testing your pitch with your non-lead investors first and making adjustments to your pitch before you start reaching out to the Omegas and Orbimeds and TCG crossovers of the world. So that's another big lesson that I've learned. And the last one, which probably in my opinion is the most important, is keep your confidence high. I mean, especially in this environment, don't be surprised if you're going through 20, 30, 40 conversations and you don't feel like you're making the progress that you thought you would when you first started fundraising. Keep your confidence high. Make sure you are leveraging all the scientific conferences and presentations that you're out there. Make sure that you're getting your data published in Nature. Make sure you're getting your boards and your SABs filled out with folks that can network on your behalf and set you up with the right conversations. But I think it's really important to keep your confidence and the trust in your science high. This is an incredibly challenging field that we're in. There's going to be headwinds. There's going to be, clinical data that you're going to get that's going to force you to go into maybe a different direction that you hadn't thought about, but keep your confidence high. So those are kind of the 4 or 5 things that, hopefully can benefit others.
Yeah, very good. And this is a question that we normally finish with on the BioHub. I know I wanted to give you a bit of a heads up with it as well, but if you would have dinner with any 3 people, past or present, who would they be and why? Don't necessarily need to be biotech innovators, although they can be if you like. But yeah, 3 people for dinner.
Yeah, so this is a really boring answer, but my life is crazy right now. My wife and I we both work full time. Our kids are in school, and so honestly, just having a meal with my wife and my 3 kids, we don't get to spend especially with soccer going on and all the activities. We don't get enough time to just sit down and hang out with each other without thinking about all the day-to-day stresses of life. So I'd love to do something with them. And then the other big group is, I've got 2 nephews and 3 nieces. And again, I don't get enough time to just hang out, and they're all older now. So my 3 nieces are either in college or done with college and starting to work. And my nephews are, one nephew is starting at E&Y, and my other nephew just started at NC State. And, everybody's kind of scattered off doing their own thing, and just getting a chance to be with them and hang out and catch up on what's going on with life would be great for me. And then the last person, so I'm a sports guy. I'm a big basketball, baseball, football guy. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I grew up listening to the Cleveland Cavs on the radio in my basement while I would shoot baskets on this Nerf basketball hoop. And the player that I always used to emulate while I was in my basement was Mark Kreis. He was a point guard. And so I would just love to be able to have dinner with him, talk to him about his upbringing, what it was like to play basketball for the Cavs. I think it would just be just be really cool.
Nice. Well, some awesome answers there. And yeah, I think I didn't actually know too much about General Oncology prior to you joining, then check them out. But you've given a great overview there, and sounds like what you're working on as well is exciting, and there's some differentiation. And yeah, just your outlook on fundraising as well has been super insightful. So yeah, thanks for helping us out with this. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Tom. Appreciate the time.